When the board pushed me out after 18 years and slid my chair across the table to the CEO's son, I didn't argue or raise my voice. I watched him smile, heard him talk about progress, and quietly accepted the box they handed me. What no one in that room understood was that one call waiting on my phone would flip the balance of power, and by the time the truth surfaced, the company that erased me would be the one struggling to stand. Before I walk you through how that single call rewired everything, take a moment to support this channel, tap subscribe, leave a comment with where you're listening from, and help this story reach others who might be standing at a crossroads they didn't choose. My name is Daniel Moore. I was 58 years old the day Northbridge Logistics decided I was finished. Not retired. Not transitioned. Finished. 18 years of early mornings and late nights compressed into a sentence about new energy. I sat at the far end of the glass conference table as Thomas Hale, the board chairman, spoke with a voice that carried well-practiced sympathy and very little substance. The city skyline outside the windows looked calm, almost indifferent, as if it had seen this kind of thing before and knew how it usually ended. "We need a different engine," Thomas said, folding his hands. "Someone who understands where the market is going." I understood exactly where the market was going. I had built the route network that kept Northbridge profitable when fuel prices spiked. I had negotiated contracts that held through downturns when competitors folded. I had stood in freezing warehouses at midnight making sure drivers got home safe during storms because delays weren't just numbers to me, they were people. None of that was invited into the room that morning. Richard Prescott, the CEO, finally met my eyes. His look held a rehearsed warmth, the kind you practice in the mirror when you know the conversation won't go well. He thanked me for my service and assured me my impact was noted. Noted. As if dedication were a checkbox you tick before moving on. Then Evan Prescott stood. 33. Confident in the way people are when consequences have always been softened for them. He spoke about innovation and vision, about shaking things up. When he smiled at me, it wasn't cruel, just careless, like someone stepping over a crack without noticing who might fall into it. The meeting dragged on for 20 minutes. Transition plans. A farewell gathering. A timeline for knowledge transfer. I said nothing. I didn't defend my record. I didn't list the contracts I personally saved. Decisions like this are made long before they're announced, usually over dinners you aren't invited to. Back in my office, I packed quietly. Photos. A mug chipped at the rim from a winter storm in my third year. A plaque I never liked but kept because my daughter gave it to me. My phone buzzed. Emily, my daughter, checking in. I told her there were changes coming. I didn't tell her that loyalty had just been priced and found too expensive. As I slid the last item into the box, my fingers brushed a business card I'd kept tucked in my wallet for months. Rachel Whitaker. Helix Core Energy. She'd handed it to me after an off-the-record call that had felt casual at the time. Now it felt heavier, like a weight with purpose. The next morning, I arrived early, as I always had. The office was quiet, the kind of quiet that lets memories surface without permission. I remembered landing Helix Core's contract when everyone said we were too small. I remembered the night a pipeline incident threatened their supply chain and I drove across the state to coordinate solutions in person because trust isn't built over email. Those moments didn't show up on balance sheets, but they kept the lights on. Evan joined me mid-morning, eager and unprepared. He asked questions that skimmed the surface and missed the depth entirely. When he said logistics was basically moving things from A to B, I nodded and handed him folders thicker than he expected. Some lessons take time. Others take consequences. The farewell gathering was small. Cake. Polite applause. Evan spoke last. He thanked me and then, with a grin meant to inspire, said it was time for the company to evolve. That sometimes the past has to make room for the future. He called it progress. I shook hands with the people who mattered and walked out without looking back. In the parking lot, I sat in my truck and let the silence settle. 18 years doesn't evaporate quickly. It lingers, asking what comes next. I took out my phone and scrolled to Rachel's contact. She answered on the second ring, like she'd been expecting me. "So," she said, not unkindly, "they finally did it." I told her yes. "Then we should talk," she replied. "Dinner tonight. Somewhere quiet." I started the engine and drove away from Northbridge Logistics for the last time as an employee. The sun was low, throwing long shadows across the lot. I felt something unfamiliar but steady take hold, not anger, not grief. Focus. That night, Rachel laid documents across a table in a private dining lounge. She spoke plainly. Helix Core's contract represented a significant share of Northbridge's revenue. It existed because of relationships, not slogans. Their renewal was approaching. And Ironclad Transport had been making inquiries. She asked if I was interested in leading something new. I didn't answer right away. I listened. I asked questions. I watched the shape of the future form between courses. By the time dessert arrived, the outline was clear enough to see where it would cut. When I got home, I slept better than I had in weeks. The next day, I began making calls, not announcements, not declarations. Conversations. The kind that matter. By Monday morning, Northbridge was still celebrating its fresh start. Evan was settling into his chair, confident that titles create gravity. Somewhere across town, a different set of wheels had begun turning, quietly and with intent. And that single call, made in a parking lot at sunset, had already started changing everything. The week after my departure moved with a strange rhythm, like a storm building without thunder. On the surface, nothing had changed at Northbridge Logistics. Trucks still rolled out before dawn. Dispatch screens still glowed with schedules I had designed years earlier. Evan Prescott still occupied my former office, learning the feel of the chair before understanding the weight that came with it. From my side of the city, I watched quietly. Rachel Whitaker kept her word. 2 days after our dinner, she invited me to Helix Core Energy's headquarters for what she called an exploratory conversation. No press. No formal agenda. Just clarity. I arrived early, habit ingrained from years of being the person others waited for. The building was sleek, efficient, and deliberately understated. It reminded me of how Helix Core operated, focused on results, not appearances. Rachel greeted me with a firm handshake and led me into a conference room overlooking the Trinity Industrial Corridor. She didn't waste time. Our current contract with Northbridge expires in 60 days, she said, sliding a folder across the table. On paper, renewal makes sense. On paper. I opened the folder. Performance metrics. Delivery records. Incident reports. Most of them bore my signature. The margins told a quieter story, notes about trust, response times, decision-making under pressure. Your replacement has already called, Rachel continued. Twice. I raised an eyebrow. He wanted to know why we require certain redundancies. Asked if some of them were legacy practices that could be cut for efficiency. That told me everything I needed to know. Redundancies are invisible until the moment they save you. Rachel leaned back. Daniel, I need to be direct. Our board is uncomfortable. The service we've received from Northbridge has always been tied to you. Not the logo. Not the brand. You. I nodded. This wasn't ego. It was acknowledgement. She slid a second document across the table. Ironclad transport. Financials. Growth projections. Leadership bios. The CEO, Laura Kensington, had a reputation for precision and patience. The kind of executive who didn't chase trends but anticipated them. Ironclad wants to expand their inland logistics division, Rachel said. They asked who they should talk to if they wanted to do it right. I didn't need to ask how my name came up. They've offered me a role, she added. Not as a consultant. As a partner. That was new. The conversation lasted 2 hours. We discussed transition risks, client communication strategies, and the difference between speed and haste. When I left, I wasn't committed to anything yet. But the direction was unmistakable. Back at Northbridge, Evan was discovering the difference between enthusiasm and understanding. He scheduled meetings with clients he'd never met, armed with slides and buzzwords. Some listened politely. Others asked questions he couldn't answer. He tried to reach me twice. I didn't respond. On Thursday afternoon, my phone rang with a number I recognized immediately, Richard Prescott. Daniel, he said, voice tight. We need to talk. About what? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Client continuity, he replied. Transition support. We're willing to discuss consulting arrangements. I smiled to myself. The word consultant appears when certainty begins to wobble. My employment ended, I said. I'm focusing on next steps. This would be compensated, Richard added quickly. I'm sure, I replied. But I'm unavailable. The call ended without ceremony. That evening, I met Laura Kensington in person. Ironclad Transport's offices sat near the Trinity Industrial Corridor, all steel lines and open space. Laura didn't start with flattery. She started with numbers. We've watched Northbridge for years, she said. Their success was concentrated in relationships. When those relationships shifted, the structure would always be vulnerable. She showed me analyses that mirrored my own instincts. Debt creeping upward. Margins thinning. Decisions made to impress investors rather than protect operations. We want to build something durable, Laura continued. And we want leadership that understands the cost of cutting corners. The offer was straightforward. Executive leadership. Equity participation. Authority to build a team without interference. No family politics. No shadow decision makers. I asked for 48 hours. That night, I called Emily. I told her the truth, about the board, about Evan, about the opportunity in front of me. She listened quietly, then said something that settled the last of my hesitation. You taught me that loyalty matters, she said. But you also taught me that loyalty doesn't mean staying where you're not valued. The next morning, I accepted Ironclad's offer. The ripple started small. Rachel scheduled a formal review meeting with Northbridge. Evan attended, confident and unprepared. When Helix Core requested clarification on contingency protocols, Evan promised follow-ups that never arrived. Rachel documented everything. By the end of the week, Helix Core notified Northbridge that renewal discussions were paused pending strategic review. Northbridge's internal messages shifted tone. Emergency meetings. Consultants brought in. Evan's confidence turned sharp, then brittle. Ironclad moved with quiet efficiency. Legal teams prepared transition frameworks. Operations mapped routes. I worked late into the night, not out of desperation but alignment. Every call I made landed on familiar ground. People remembered how I handled pressure. How I answered at midnight. How I showed up when it mattered. 2 other clients reached out independently. They didn't ask why I left Northbridge. They asked where I was going. On Friday evening, as the city settled into weekend calm, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Daniel, this is Evan Prescott. We need to talk. Urgently. I didn't reply. By Monday morning, Ironclad Transport announced the formation of a new inland logistics division. No press release mentioned my name yet. That would come later. For now, the groundwork mattered more. Across town, Northbridge faced a reality it hadn't anticipated. Contracts don't just exist on paper. They exist in trust, built slowly and lost quickly. And the call that had started everything was no longer a secret. It was a signal. By the 3rd week, the tension around Northbridge logistics was no longer subtle. It had moved past internal unease and into something sharper, confusion mixed with urgency. From the outside, the company still looked stable. Trucks moved. Schedules held. Press statements spoke of strategic realignment. Inside, however, the ground was shifting faster than anyone wanted to admit. Ironclad Transport moved in the opposite direction, quiet, deliberate, and coordinated. Laura Kensington understood something Richard Prescott never had: that momentum is built before announcements, not after. While Northbridge scrambled to reassure clients, Ironclad prepared to receive them. My days filled quickly. Calls from procurement directors I'd worked with for over a decade. Operations managers who knew my voice before I introduced myself. None of them asked for explanations. They asked one question, phrased different ways. Where are you now? That question carried weight. Because where I went, reliability tended to follow. Rachel Whitaker called me early one morning, her tone measured but unmistakably firm. We've completed our internal review, she said. Helix Core will not be renewing with Northbridge. I let the word settle. We'll be transitioning our logistics operations to Ironclad, she continued. Pending final contract execution. I thanked her, but she wasn't finished. Daniel, I want you to know this wasn't personal. It was practical. The service continuity we need doesn't survive leadership experiments. After we hung up, I forwarded the confirmation to Laura. She didn't celebrate. She scheduled. Within hours, Ironclad's operations team activated transition protocols. Routes were mapped. Drivers vetted. Redundancies tested. Nothing rushed. Everything verified. At Northbridge, the reaction was immediate and chaotic. Evan Prescott convened an emergency leadership meeting. Consultants dialed in. Legal teams reviewed clauses they hadn't bothered reading closely before. The loss of Helix Core represented nearly half of Northbridge's revenue stream, and the board understood what that meant even if they didn't say it aloud. Richard Prescott called me again. This time, his voice had lost its polish. Daniel, he said, we need your help. Temporarily. Advisory capacity. I paused before answering. You removed me, I said. You replaced me. You assured the board you were moving forward. We miscalculated, he admitted. Evan is still finding his footing. That's not my problem, I replied. We're willing to renegotiate, Richard pressed. Title? Compensation. Influence. I looked out the window at Ironclad's yard, where crews were preparing for expanded operations. I've already moved on, I said. You should do the same. The call ended in silence. By midweek, news began circulating in industry circles. Not headlines yet, just conversations. Whispers at luncheons. Notes passed between executives. Northbridge was losing Helix Core. Ironclad was expanding. Daniel Moore was leading it. 2 more clients formally requested meetings with Ironclad. Both had been Northbridge accounts I personally managed for years. Both cited concerns about leadership continuity and response capability. Evan tried to intervene. He reached out directly to one of them, offering discounted rates and expedited reviews. The response he received was polite but final. "We value experience over incentives," the email read. Internally, Northbridge's board began to fracture. Thomas Hale questioned the decision to accelerate leadership change. Finance flagged liquidity concerns. Operations reported strain as experienced managers quietly explored opportunities elsewhere. And then the market reacted. Northbridge's lenders requested updated forecasts. Credit terms tightened. The stock price dipped, not enough to panic publicly, but enough to rattle investors who knew how to read patterns. Ironclad, meanwhile, announced its inland logistics division formally. The press release was concise. It emphasized stability, experience, and continuity. My name appeared once, in a single sentence outlining leadership. That sentence traveled farther than I expected. By Friday, my calendar was booked solid for weeks. Meetings with potential partners. Calls from regional carriers. Inquiries from firms that had never considered Ironclad before. Laura stopped by my office late that afternoon. "You should see this," she said, handing me her tablet. An article from Metro Commerce Review filled the screen. Northbridge Logistics faces uncertainty after major client exit. The piece detailed HelixCore's departure, hinted at leadership tensions, and noted Ironclad's rapid expansion as a key factor reshaping the regional logistics landscape. There was a quote from an unnamed industry analyst. "Client loyalty in logistics often follows individuals, not institutions." Laura watched my reaction carefully. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm focused," I said honestly. That night, I received a message from an old Northbridge operations manager, Nathan Cole, the one who had stayed behind to steady the ship. "I didn't think it would unravel this fast," he wrote. Neither did I. But once trust breaks, time accelerates. By Sunday evening, Evan Prescott resigned. The official statement cited personal reasons. Internally, everyone knew better. He had been handed a machine built for endurance and tried to run it like a sprint. When it failed to respond, there was nowhere to hide. Richard Prescott stepped in as interim operations lead, a move that signaled desperation more than control. The board scheduled emergency sessions. Advisors circled. And still, the calls kept coming. From my office at Ironclad, I watched Northbridge's position weaken not because I attacked it, but because it no longer had what it needed to stand. Experience can't be replaced by proximity to power. Relationships can't be transferred with a title. Late that night, as I shut down my computer, I thought back to the moment in the conference room when Evan smiled and talked about progress. Progress isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with confidence. It moves quietly, taking everything with it when no one is paying attention. By the time the board at Northbridge realized the damage wasn't theoretical, it was already measurable. Numbers don't lie, but they do lag. What looked like a temporary dip on spreadsheets was, in reality, a structural failure unfolding in slow motion. Contracts weren't just expiring, they were being questioned. Long-term partners weren't just nervous, they were preparing exits. From Ironclad's side, everything accelerated with a calm that surprised even me. Laura Kensington understood timing. She didn't rush announcements or chase headlines. She focused on capacity, redundancy, and people. We expanded in layers, not leaps. Every new client was on board with a plan that assumed stress before it ever arrived. Rachel Whitaker became a steady presence in those early weeks, bridging conversations with clarity. HelixCore's transition unfolded smoothly because the groundwork had been laid years earlier, by me, by trust earned shipment after shipment. When the first Ironclad trucks rolled under HelixCore's banner, there were no hiccups. That absence of drama spoke louder than any press release. At Northbridge, drama was all they had. Thomas Hale called an emergency board session that stretched late into the night. Advisors dialed in from different time zones. The language shifted from optimism to containment. How to reassure investors. How to stabilize credit. How to stop the bleeding without admitting the wound was deep. Richard Prescott tried to reassert control. He sent company-wide emails emphasizing unity and resilience. He spoke about transformation and learning curves. But leadership isn't proven in language, it's proven in response time. And response time had slowed. Drivers noticed first. Routes changed without explanation. Backup plans weren't clear. Dispatchers hesitated, waiting for approvals that used to be automatic. Small delays stacked into larger ones. Clients noticed. They always do. Nathan Cole called me late one evening. "I don't know how much longer I can hold this together," he said quietly. "People are scared. The board keeps asking for projections, but they don't understand operations." "You don't owe me updates," I told him. "You owe yourself a future." There was a pause. Then he asked the question I'd been expecting. Would Ironclad consider bringing me on? Send your resume, I said. Laura values people who understand pressure. Within a week, Nathan joined Ironclad. So did 2 senior dispatch managers and a regional operations lead. None were recruited aggressively. They came because stability attracts competence. Northbridge's response was predictable. Non-compete threats. Legal language. Warnings about loyalty. Most of it went nowhere. Contracts had been reviewed. Exit paths were clean. Fear doesn't bind people as well as respect does. The market noticed the shift. Metro Commerce Review ran a follow-up piece detailing Ironclad's expansion and Northbridge's restructuring. Analysts began asking pointed questions on earnings calls. Why had such a significant portion of revenue been tied to a single relationship? Why was leadership turnover accelerating during a critical period? Richard Prescott attempted damage control. He scheduled interviews. He spoke about succession planning and innovation. But every answer raised another question. Why replace experience before the replacement was ready? Behind closed doors, the board fractured further. Thomas Hale pushed for outside capital. Others resisted, fearing dilution. Emergency funding discussions leaked, not through headlines, but through banking channels. Suppliers tightened terms. Insurance premiums rose. Ironclad, meanwhile, secured 2 additional multi-year contracts. Not flashy. Not headline-grabbing. Just solid, dependable growth. The kind that compounds quietly. One afternoon, Laura called me into her office. "We've been approached about an acquisition," she said, sliding a briefing across the desk. I skimmed the document and recognized the name immediately. Northbridge Logistics. "They're exploring options," Laura continued. "Asset sale. Partial acquisition. They need liquidity." I leaned back, absorbing the irony. "What's your take?" she asked. "We don't need them," I said. "But some of their infrastructure could be useful. If the terms are right." Laura nodded. "That's my thinking." Negotiations didn't begin right away. There was no rush. Time favored patience. Weeks passed. Ironclad systems proved resilient under increased load. Clients praised communication. Drivers appreciated consistency. Small wins accumulated into something larger, a reputation that didn't need defending. Northbridge announced restructuring publicly. Layoffs followed. Departments merged. The downtown tower was listed for lease. What remained of the company retreated to a smaller footprint, focused on survival rather than growth. Richard Prescott resigned shortly after. The official statement cited health reasons. The board appointed an interim CEO from outside the family. Too late to restore confidence, but early enough to prevent collapse. One evening, as I reviewed transition reports, an unfamiliar number lit up my phone. "Daniel," the voice said cautiously. "This is Thomas Hale." I listened. "We made a mistake," he admitted. "We underestimated the importance of continuity." "I know," I replied. "We'd like to explore a conversation," he continued. "About collaboration. Perhaps even reacquisition." I looked at the data on my screen, Ironclad's upward trend, Northbridge's slow retreat. "Send a proposal," I said. "We'll review it." After the call, I sat quietly for a moment. Not satisfied. Not vindicated. Just aware. 18 years earlier, I'd joined Northbridge to build something durable. I had done that. When they decided durability was outdated, the structure couldn't hold. Outside my office window, the city moved steadily, indifferent to corporate missteps. Somewhere nearby, ironclad trucks rolled out on schedules we designed to withstand stress. And for the first time since that conference room meeting, the outcome felt inevitable. The proposal from Northbridge arrived 3 days later, thin and careful, like a document afraid of its own conclusions. I read it once without emotion, then again with context. Asset acquisition. Limited liabilities. Retention of select infrastructure. No guarantees about people. No acknowledgement of how they had arrived here. Just numbers and contingencies, stripped of memory. Laura Kensington joined me in the conference room an hour later. She didn't ask how I felt about it. She asked what made sense. "We don't buy mistakes," she said calmly. "We buy value." "That value isn't their name," I replied. "It's their routes, their warehouses, and the people who still know how to run them." She nodded. "Then we proceed carefully." Negotiations unfolded the way collapsing companies always negotiate, urgently, but pretending otherwise. Northbridge's interim leadership wanted speed. Ironclad wanted clarity. The gap between those two priorities told the real story. While lawyers traded language, the market continued to decide. Clients that hadn't yet moved began making inquiries. Not all of them left Northbridge immediately, but many shortened commitments, added escape clauses, or requested dual provider arrangements. Confidence had fractured, and once that happens, it never returns all at once. I received a message from Evan Prescott through a mutual contact. He didn't ask for a meeting. He asked for advice. I didn't respond. Some lessons require silence to be understood. Ironclad finalized its acquisition of select Northbridge assets 6 weeks later. No press tour. No victory lap. Just a clean transfer of infrastructure and personnel who wanted stability more than sentiment. Nathan Cole helped oversee the integration, steady and methodical. Watching him lead confirmed something I'd known for years: competence rarely announces itself. Northbridge Logistics, as it had existed, effectively ended that quarter. The name remained on paper, but its presence in the market was reduced to subcontracting and local operations. The board dissolved. Investors exited. What survived was a shadow of the company I had helped build, operating without the scale or trust that once defined it. Emily visited my office one afternoon, standing quietly by the window that overlooked Ironclad's main yard. "You look different," she said. "How so?" "Lighter," she replied. "Not happier. Just steadier." She was right. What I felt wasn't joy or triumph. It was alignment. The absence of noise where doubt used to live. The article in Global Business Ledger came out a month later. It wasn't about Northbridge's fall. It was about Ironclad's rise, measured, deliberate, rooted in leadership continuity. My name appeared twice. Once in the opening paragraph. Once near the end, attached to a sentence about long-term vision. I saved the article but didn't frame it. Some mornings, I still wake up early, just before the city stirs. Old habits don't vanish, they evolve. I walk the floor. I talk to drivers. I check schedules. The work hasn't changed. The environment has. Occasionally, someone asks if I regret not fighting harder in that conference room. If I wish I'd argued, pleaded, demanded recognition. I always answer the same way. Power doesn't shift when you raise your voice. It shifts when you remove what others assumed they controlled. The board thought they replaced a position. They didn't understand they were removing the connective tissue holding everything together. The phone call I made wasn't an attack. It was a decision, to go where experience mattered, where relationships were respected, where outcomes weren't inherited. Northbridge didn't lose everything in a single day. It lost it one assumption at a time. And when the dust finally settled, the lesson was simple and unforgiving. Titles can be reassigned. Trust cannot. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that experience still carries weight and quiet decisions can change entire outcomes, do me a final favor. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and help this story reach others who may need to hear it before their own turning point arrives.